Hello everyone, welcome to my video course lesson Understanding Proto in JavaScript. In this lesson, we are going to learn all about the Proto accessor property in JavaScript. The Proto accessor property in JavaScript is the least known feature in JavaScript, but in this course, I am going to explain what it entails, how it works, how we can access it, and what good it brings to us. First, before we move on, we need to understand a few things in JavaScript. First, we need to understand how the prototype works, how the prototype chain works, how the inheritance in JavaScript works, and the body structure of an object, either from an object literal or from a constructor function. In JavaScript, whenever we create an object, it attaches a prototype property to that object. Now, see here, this prototype property is created from an object. Now, note, an object is the base class of all objects in JavaScript. And in this base class, we have all these functions defined here. So this base class object is just like writing a class object like this, and then having all the methods from the constructor to these methods has own property, is prototype of, to value of, and all other getters and setters. So whenever we create an object in JavaScript attaches this prototype object to that object that we created. So in this prototype is mainly used for inheritance in JavaScript. See that when we created this our object user, we only added to it this property age with value 90. And yes, and this is what the same thing that we got, but we still have this extra object in it. This was attached by JavaScript and it has all these methods there. Now these methods can also be called by our object and it will work. Like for example, we can call user dot to string and it will work. So the methods here are all implemented internally in JavaScript inside this class object. Whenever we access a property in an object, JavaScript searches for that property that we accessed inside the body of that object. Let's take for example, in this our object user, let's access age. So what JavaScript does in this case is to pick this name age and search for it in the body of the user. It finds it here and it will return the value 90. Now we can also call the any of these methods except the constructor. Here in this prototype property here, we can call to string like we have seen before. Now when we do this, what JavaScript does is it will first look for this to string inside the object's body. In this case, we have no to string defined here. So what it does is that it will move over to this prototype property and search for it inside here. So it sees it here, then it sees that it's a function and it calls it. Now, if it does not see that property, either in the body or in the prototype, then it returns undefined. Now, we have seen objects created from an object literal. Now, let's look at objects created from a function. Now, we see it here, this function, we create an object of it and we log the test. Now, before we proceed, whenever we create an object from a constructor function, now we can attach a prototype object to the function. We can attach it like this, test.prototype. JavaScript expects this. So because of that, inside the object we create of from this constructor function, JavaScript creates a prototype that points to that prototype. So, and also inside that prototype is an object. So also, like we said, wherever there's an object, there's a prototype there. It creates another prototype. Now, because now this object is now coming from an object literal, it's not coming from anywhere. So it will now point to the base class object. So this prototype now has all the properties of the base class object, and it will not have the prototype again because it has come to the end of the prototype chain. Now we can now call any methods inside there. Like let's say we can call to string and it will work. To string like this, it will work. So you see, so what it happens is that when we call this, like always, JavaScript will check at the body of this test. It sees nothing here. It goes into the prototype. It sees no to string there. Then it goes into the prototype again. It sees to string and then it calls it. If it doesn't see to string here, it returns null because it has reached the end of the chain. Now let's look at how we can use prototype to inherit properties. Now we have this test, and here you see we attached say hello to the prototype. Now let's run it. And we open it up, we'll see the name inside here. Then open the prototype. You see that in this case now, the say hello we defined in the prototype exists here. So that's the reason for this prototype object, because JavaScript knows prototype object can come inside the test function. So it creates it here and then attaches all the properties we have in the prototype object inside it. Then and also inside the prototype object, it now has the base prototype that points to the base class object. Now let's modify this code and see how we can now create another function and then make it inherit all the properties from the test function. Now we have this function eTest. It will just be an empty function. Okay. And we create an object of it. Const eTest, new keyword eTest, braces close. So now if we call this eTest like this and call the say hello function, it will throw an error or it will call undefined because the say hello property does not exist inside the function eTest. Now we want to call this say hello inside the eTest, but we don't want to define it inside the eTest function. So we want to make it to inherit this say hello function from the test here. So what we do is to simply point the prototype of this eTest to the prototype of the test function dot prototype test function. So this is how the inheritance takes place. Now the inside the prototype of eTest, we will have the prototype of test, so that when we call say hello, it will loop into the eTest. It doesn't see the say hello, then it goes into the prototype of eTest. It will now see say hello because it now points the prototype of eTest now points to the prototype of test. Then it calls the say hello and it returns hello. Let's see it. No, this is for the test object. Let's log the eTest object. Now let's see it. We open it up. There's nothing there in the body. Then it points to the its prototype. Now in this case, it points to the test prototype. Now we see the prototype of the test function. Now you see that it resembles what we have here. You see it. Let's open this one up. You see it. That is the same thing. So and inside the prototype is now the base object. Now we can now call eTest.sayHello and it works. So this is how inheritance works. We are now able to call the sayHello method inside the eTest object. Although the sayHello function was not defined inside the eTest function, yet we are able to call it inside this test function because of this inheritance that happened here. So further down in this tutorial, we'll see how we can inherit objects and properties and their methods using the proto accessor property. Now we have seen how the prototype works and how we can use it to inherit objects in JavaScript. Now let's come down to the proto accessor property. The proto accessor property is used to expose the prototype object. So we can see here, let's create an object here like this. No, let's just call it test object. and create an object of the test constructor function like this. Now to access this prototype, we use the proto. We can call it like this. We can call the proto like this, and then we access the prototype of this. See that you see the prototype. We have all the objects there. This user named here, but we cannot access the body of the object. Only the prototype of the object that we can access. So we have everything here. We see we don't have the age here. So what this proto does is to return or expose the prototype object defined in the object it was called. So now let's say we have this function like this. Let's clear this out and write this. Let's say we have test.prototype dot status like this. Then let's access the proto object like this. So you see it returns the prototype that we defined here. See, we have the status here, so we defined it here. We have the user property here, it's defined here. So we cannot get this age here because it's inside uh, the body of the constructor function. So it does not exist here. It only exists in the object. Now let's open up the test object and see. You see it only exists here. So you can see that the proto is used to access the prototype of this. So the prototype, when we call this prototype on objects created via constructor function, it returns the prototype object defined in that constructor function. But if we call this proto inside an object literal, it returns to us the object prototype. It returns to us the object prototype like this, the object dot prototype. This is what I mean. It returns to us this. Let's test it out. Let's say we have the object user, an object literal like this, const age 90. Now let's call the user. You see, then you see this object is an object. This object is an object literal created directly. We did not create it from the construction function. So inside it inherits the prototype from the base object, which is object 2. So now here the prototype points to the base object this. You see it points now to the base object this. So now with this we can actually inherit object. We can actually make object literals to inherit their own properties. Like for example, we did the inheritance via constructor function. Now let's say we have two object literals like this: user, age. Then we'll have something like extended user that has name, Now we want this extended object to us to inherit the properties we have in this user. We'll use the proto object to do it. What we have to do is to assign the proto object we have here to this user literal. So what we're going to do is proto, we do something like this, proto, and assign it to the user object. So the extended user inherits every data property and method we have in this user literal. So let's expand the extended object. Let's see what we have. You see that in the extended user, we have the body name that we define here, but in the prototype we will have this. We'll have the user age. This thing, it will point to there, so you see it. We have it here. So we have successfully extended this object to inherit the properties of this user object. So we can access the age and it will return to us. So this is how we use the proto object to expose the prototype of object and also extend or inherit methods from other object literals.